I move away from the mic to breathe in. What is up, boys and girls? This is OB, aka 3X, welcoming you once again inside of Volume 2 of the weekly upload update for WWE 2K18. This, of course, is Episode 8. And yeah, I know I said I was going to upload some more of my XWA Diamond roster, but to quote the words of the legendary Eddie Guerrero, I lied. Reason being, I got finished 6 brand new male creations that I just had to get out there because I really like the way that they came out. So we got a bit of a steering into a different course, so to speak, for this week. And yeah, without any further ado, we'll jump right into that. So we're gonna open things up with the 2018 version of the group or faction or team, however it is you want to call it, known as the Shoguns. And we're gonna kick things off with their more veteran member. I guess if I could call anyone the leader, it would be this guy here. And this, of course, is the 2018 version of the artist formerly known as the Amazing Dragon, AKI-SAN. He still is AKI-SAN. However, his nickname has slightly changed. No longer is he the Amazing Dragon. Now he simply goes by the moniker of the Dragon Warrior. And there are several reasons why I decided I wanted to make the name change. The most important of which obviously is his overall look, which you can see looks dramatically different compared to how it is that I had him looking in 2K17 and even in 2K16 before that. Well, realistically, basically every year that I've made him. AKI-SAN's been one of those characters that's always changed his appearance, aside from the fact that he is a masked wrestler, such as Ultimo Dragon and Jushin Thunder Liger. I never really finalized a distinctive look for him as far as attire is concerned, because that's just the nature of the character. He's always changing. He's almost like a chameleon, or some kind of a serpent that sheds its skin and becomes something else entirely, year after year. However, that may actually change based on the attire that I have working for him this year. Obviously, it's a variation of Kalisto's current WWE attire with some added decoration, which the second he started wearing the short tights with the kind of, I guess you could call them tassels or flaps. I don't know what you call those things going on in the front. But when Kalisto started wearing those, I was like, yeah, if they put those in the game, I'm probably going to use them for AKI-SAN, because he's the only character that I make that actually it makes sense to use those with. And sure enough, that's exactly what it is that we got. So that's exactly what it is that I get. The logo in the front here is actually the same logo that I would use normally on his top as a centerpiece or insignia, whatever it is that you want to call it. It still serves the exact same purpose of decorating the front half of his attire. It's just obviously the application looks slightly different. I actually do like the touch of the kanji going on over the Kalisto Dragon. And you got the tribal design there up top with the sun, which is a nice touch. And even though you can't actually see the red dragon entirely since it's cropped off on the flaps, it's there, even though you will obviously see it more prominently in other elements of Aki's attire. And then on the flip side again, we have the new Dragon Warrior logo, both of which the dragon design itself and the fonts obviously are using different variations of Photoshop styles to add to the decoration going on there. Let's scroll upwards here to the mask, and now you can more clearly see the old school red dragon design that I had used on his primary attire in previous versions of the game. Now it becomes an element of the mask, mainly because I couldn't actually find any mask designs that looked good enough to put on the Kalisto mask here. And I did want to have the openings that show elements of his face as opposed to completely covering it like I did with his attire last year, because that's the same thing that I had did for Riots and Crossbones, and I wanted to kind of sort of change things up just a bit for AKI-SAN. Now you'll notice underneath the mask he's got some face paint going on there. That just goes further into the mythos of the character being a more mysterious entity. For those of you who are inquisitive enough to have actually broken down his attire, had you had downloaded him in previous games, you would know that I actually do use a face texture or a face photo for AKI-SAN's actual face. It's not just the default face underneath all this. And it's not also a variation of the default face to make him look Japanese, like you have in this year's game with the templates and such. There's actually a face texture. However, the Kalisto mask kind of showed off just a little bit too much of it. So I instead opted to go with the face paint going over the face texture, just to kind of add to it. It also has a special effect to it on the fact that it kind of makes him look even more, I guess you could say, reptilian, so to speak. The actual face paint underneath there, truth be told, is that of an Oni, which is a Japanese demon, which was my initial plan for repackaging AKI-SAN, so to speak. I was going to go with a full face painted attire and completely omit the mask entirely for 2018 and probably for the foreseeable future. But I really didn't like the way that it came out, and I thought at the end it would be probably a little bit too dramatic of a change for those of you who actually do download him to all of a sudden not be masked, when forever it is that he has been masked. And I even have in context of him having that Lucha de Apuestas match against Apollo Vega to preserve his mask. Why would I want to take that away when it is that it's an honor and a tradition for him? You know, that would be like one of those questionable WWE moves like, what did you do that for? So we decided to keep it and just add some extra decoration. Flip to the back here. You'll see some extra design I threw on there. This is the main element to his secondary attire, actually, that I just put on there because I couldn't put anything else and I didn't want to use too many logos, considering the fact that there's a lot of them going on for his attires here. So once again, you have the dragon designs, this time being a different variation, clip arts going on there, and the Japanese kanji that you see going downward on the back of it actually translates to Dragon Warrior in English. The kanji actually reads in Japanese as Ryu Senshi, which literally translates to English into Dragon Warrior. So yeah, this is a variation of the kanji that you will actually see in other elements of his overall design layout, specifically his tattoos, to which, yes, he actually has many more tattoos than you would probably have known for him to have. Now, in a practical sense, this is just new stuff that I added to the character this year. But considering the fact that for the longest time when I've made AKI-SAN, he's actually worn a top that covers basically his back and chest, you could say that he's always had this ink work, but never showed it because he wore a shirt when he wrestled. So now that he's gone shirtless, all that wonderful artwork comes to bear, literally and figuratively. Now, you can't actually see the entirety of the dragon tattoo going on the back here because of the Kalisto tail on the back of the mask. I will actually put the actual artwork on screen for you to see it, but you can clearly see that it's one of those old style Japanese Yakuza style tattoo designs going on there that I may or may not elaborate on in future updates and build on with some other stuff going on in the I guess you could say clean areas of his back, particularly the traps, size of the shoulder blades, and the lower back where you don't see the tail, just to give it even more of an authentic Japanese style feel to it. Maybe add some kanji text or whatever. I still haven't made up my mind that what I'm going to be doing there, except that I know that I'm going to be doing something eventually at some point. Probably not this year. Who knows? We'll see. So now we have the arm tattoos, and this kind of mini repackaging gave me the opening to kind of change things up as far as his ink layout is concerned. Obviously the theme has always been dragons, but for the most part I've used assets that were taken from community creations for his arm tattoos, and unfortunately fell victim to the fact that those same assets that had been downloaded by people in previous versions of the game as of this moment of me creating him weren't there, which is precisely the reason why it is that I've opted to use my own designs completely, with some certain exceptions for attires and such like that. Specifically for tattoos, I'll find my own images through Google search and do my own graphic manipulations and use my own stuff. That way it's there so I can be consistent year by year. So that pretty much starts now for Mr. AKI-SAN. You can see here we've got a dragon holding a yin-yang symbol, and then for added effect there's actually a fairy that's riding the dragon, which is a kind of a nice touch there. Little extra. And then on the front again we have the Japanese kanji. This is the same kanji that you see on the back of the mask, just in a different typeface that says the same thing, Dragon Warrior, in Japanese. And we will scroll over to the other arm, and it's basically just reversed. Still the same elements, just in a different direction. So from the front, you actually see the kanji on the front of the shoulder blades, and the front of the shoulder, excuse me, and the bicep, which is a nice effect, if I may say so myself. And then while we have him full front here, you can see the chest tattoo, which again, in the same spirit of the back tattoo, you could say has always been there but was just covered up. And again, same theme. You got a double dragon going on there with the yin-yang symbol in the center, which is again very nice looking design, and it all comes together very, very well from a distance to complete the I guess you could say maturation of AKI-SAN into the current form of competitor that he is. Obviously he started out as a cruiserweight when I first made him way back in 2006 as Dragon Boy, which was kind of a variation of the Shark Boy gimmick from TNA. And then he just kind of evolved from there into what it is that you see here. His final form, if you will. This would be his Super Saiyan moment, so to speak. So there's a close look at the top half. We'll scroll down here to give you a quick look at the bottom, which is basically the kick pad. This is basically Kalisto's attire, pretty much. The only difference is the color variations, and obviously the addition of the logos, which again is the same red dragon logo that I have going on for his previous year's attire, just in its own splendor, and it comes together very well. And yeah, probably one of the more ornate and decorative attires I will make year by year goes to AKI-SAN, because that's completely intentional for the character. I've probably said this many times before when I've showed you other creations about how I don't want certain attires to look too busy and have too much going on. That's never the case with this guy. I want as much going on as possible, because that's the type of character that he is. He's always about the visual. And needless to say, this particular version of AKI-SAN, this attire, is very visual. So, that being said, let's have a look now at his entrance gear. So, for the entrance gear, I decided I wanted to go with a walkout shirt, even though I probably should have flipped that around and put a traditional robe on his primary attire as opposed to his secondary attire, which you will see. But the main focus here, the main idea, if you will, was that I wanted the Dragon Warrior logo to get its own shine, so to speak. Even though it's on the back of the tights, it's still kind of I guess you could say jumbled up in there with the rest of the logo work going on in the tights. So here on the shirt, it's by itself. It's got its own focus, and you can pretty much see all the detail going on that I put in this logo. I just wanted to give it its own, you know, moment in the spotlight, so to speak. Maybe I will throw a robe on him using this, which would probably make more sense now that I'm thinking about it. But that will be a future update. You can do it yourself if you want to. The version that you get when you download him will have this shirt as his entrance gear. The version that you see on the shows more than likely will not. But it will be pretty easy for you to edit it when you see it in your own game. So there is that much. So for the secondary attire, I kind of veered away from an idea that I had previously mentioned a couple of times in other videos, that being using the color scheme or color format that I use primarily for Yoshi Togo. Now, I had initially planned on doing that for all of the students slash disciples of the Togo Dojo, kind of in the same way that I have all of the students of the School of Hardcore wearing that Roots of Fight style walkout shirt in one of their attires. So I kind of did away with that idea for now, at least, in terms of AKI-SAN, in place of just making a different color variation using the different logo that you saw on the back of his mask for the primary attire. Now, in all truth, I could probably still change that color scheme still here and make it the blue with white and red elements, but for now, just like in the case of the walkout shirt, this will be the first version of the attire that you get, which is kind of like a fire dragon type of thing going with the red and orange color scheme, red, orange, and black color scheme. Kind of reminds me a lot of Christian Phoenix's color schemes, because he uses the same colors. And, you know, it makes sense. He's a phoenix, AKI-SAN is a dragon, so yeah, you know, it both involves fire as an element. pretty much the elements that you see are stuff that you've seen in other parts of his other attires. Give you a quick rundown of those. You see them obviously along the back of the mask and the tail this time around. Variation of the logo going on the back side of the trunks. This is the actual AKI-SAN Dragon Warrior logo that I made initially, that made me decide I wanted to change his nickname and go a different direction for the character, at least appearance wise. So the dragon logo there is the same as his chest tattoo, and then we got the font there going on with the Photoshop style, decorating it, the yin yang in the center. Over in the front, once again, we have the overlap, the black dragons going on with the Dragon Warrior kanji, which also appears down low on the kick pads. And yeah, that's just basically color variation going on there, in combination with some different logo work. And yeah, as I said, this might change in a future update, but the version that you get, or the version that you download, will be this version here. And of course, if you want to flip the colors around, you can do so at your own leisure or peril, if you will. So that's that. And as you can see from the secondary attire's entrance gear, you can pretty much get the idea of why it is that I thought at the last second that maybe I should use that as his primary entrance gear. But we didn't veer from that, so this will be secondary and pending primary in a variation or edit at some point in the not so distant future. So I don't know who actually wears this entrance robe, but the high collar effect is obviously the highlight to it. Gives a lot of leeway to use the dragon logo there that you see obviously over the collar, and towards the back there with the embossing feature, it really gives it a very, very decorative and unique look to it. Also decided I wanted to go with orange and black because I tried it with the red and black and it took too much away from the logo. I really wanted that to be a prominent and noticeable element in this particular attire or entrance gear for the attire, so we went with orange, and it actually blends very well with the rest of his gear to the point where it actually comes together, and to the point where maybe decide maybe I should probably put that on the primary. So yeah, you'll see how that all comes into its own when it is that you actually see him walking out with this gear on, which is pretty damn cool. But yeah, that's pretty much the, I guess you could say, initial version of AKI-SAN for 2018. There are more than likely going to be some subtle edits to his look over the course of the year that I of course will document in future videos, but this version here, along with all the rest of the CAWS that you see in this video, as always, are already on Community Creations for you to download at this very moment. So go on and get them. Next up on the list is the third and newest member of the Shoguns. This of course being the 2018 version of Apollo Vega, the newly reformed Apollo Vega, formerly of World's Finest and formerly of a tag team known as Nueva Lucha, along with Marco Juventus, who is now a member of Dusk. So, oh boy, their paths have certainly gone in completely different directions since that fine, fateful night that Happy Face almost broke Marco Juventus's back. But that's another tale for another day. let's scroll in here first and foremost to the tights, because this is the main thing I want to gush over right now. The fact that the wrap function that they added to the game takes previously made logos that I have used for his attires, and many other people's for that matter, if you've noticed, and transforms them from just merely elements that I use in the gear to the actual gear itself. This design here I pulled from a Google search. Obviously it's kind of like a sleek little tribal design based off of the actual Mexican flag, using the same elements. You got the bird and the snake that is actually part of the crest that is in the center of the Mexican flag. Just really stylishly designed here. And in previous versions of his attire, you would see that as part of the attire, like striped along the front and the back. Now it's the entire design. It takes over the entire area of the trunks and looks freaking gorgeous. The only thing is that it leaves that negative space there, that little strip or patch of black on the left side that I wasn't too happy of keeping there. So I put the Vega logo, which was a mask of this design that I put over a font in Photoshop. I used that in alternate versions of his attire in the past, and just used that as the fill-in, so to speak, for the left-hand side of his gear. Well, it's to your right, but it would be his left if you were standing behind him like so. See? Left arm, right arm, stuff like that. So yeah, really, really nice look. And I can keep on talking about how amazing that wrap function is for designing logos and placing on attires and such like that, but the proof's in the pudding. You've already seen enough examples of it that it's a very, very, very big deal. And I just hope they build on it, and more importantly, I hope they don't ever take it away, because they do certainly have a tendency of taking away things and features that work together well without any warning or explanation whatsoever. Looking at you, hair and mask combinations. Yeah, you knew that was coming. I just wanted to get that out of the way as fast as possible. Anyway, we're going to scroll up now to the ink work going on, because it's pretty much the same ink work that I've used on his character for as long as it is that I've made him, pretty much in the current generation of games. You have this kind of Mayan design going on the chest, then kind of like a Batista style tribal design on the left arm, and then crossing over to the right arm, you've got this cool looking artwork piece here of a female costumed as an Aztec or Mayan warrior. Nice touch, and it looks like something that someone would actually get tattooed, like somebody from Mexico. So it fits his character, it fits his persona, and yeah, it's probably my favorite element on his tattoo designs, because it's more stylistic and abstract than the traditional style stuff that you see going on in the front and also on the back, even though the back looks pretty damn cool too. That's the new addition for the 2018 version of him. He previously had no back tattoo, now he does. And again, keeping in theme to the Mayan slash Incan slash ancient Mexican culture designs, that's what we went with. And this was actually a process of elimination, because I found some really, really good designs on Google search, but I decided I wanted to go with something that looks a little more traditional. And this you see here is the end result. So yeah, scroll up to the face here. Nothing remarkable except for the fact that I actually went on and found an actual face texture for him. If you recall, when I showcased him in last year's game, it was basically a morph of the default face that I kind of manipulated to kind of look more like a Hispanic, Latin, Mexican gentleman. So this year I just found the face of a Spanish guy, Mexican dude, and put that on there. Credit to whoever it was that I actually used, because obviously as it is that I've said before, will use unnamed face photos of specific models or just stock photography, as opposed to celebrities or more well-known people. 9 times out of 10, there are obvious actual exceptions to this rule that I've used, and I've given explanations for that, obviously. But yeah, in the case of Mr. Vega here, we wanted to go with something or someone unknown, just to kind of make the focus on the character itself and not so much who the character might be based off of, considering the fact that he's not necessarily based off of anyone in particular. Well, no, he is actually based off of a wrestler that used to compete in TNA back before it became Impact Wrestling, even before it actually started showing on television, like the first couple years. His name was Gran Apollo, and at one point he was a masked wrestler, then he unmasked. I think he also briefly was a member of LAX back when it first started, the original LAX. This is like before Homicide and Hernandez even. And yeah, that's the basic premise behind the character. I could never actually find a good enough quality photograph of Gran Apollo's face to use as the base. And then there's the fact that I usually, if I make a character that's based off of a wrestler, don't use actually the wrestler's face. So there's that as well. So he's got kind of that going on with him. And then I've also sort of absorbed Hernandez into his moveset style and mannerisms. You can see that specifically in the Superman logo that is got the Mexican flag stylized into it. That is a direct play off of Hernandez's nickname, which was Super Mex, considering the fact that you have a near 300-pound guy who could fly over the top rope effortlessly, I might add, and just as easily hoist you over his shoulders and power bomb you over the top rope himself. That was like power and agility personified was him, and he was one of my favorite wrestlers. He still competes. It's just that I have not seen him. I don't know if he's still in Impact Wrestling. I know they have, or at one point had a remake of LAX. I don't know if he's a member of it or not, but yeah. So there's that little element going on there in the knee pads. And then also, over time, I kind of absorbed Batista into his moveset as well. Like power bombs and specifically like the spear, the muscle buster, jackhammer, stuff like that. Kind of a perfect example of how I take one character with one inspiration and then just start adding different elements from other points in time and points of reference, more specifically, and it all comes together into one pretty little package. Now, another person, as far as I'm also recalling here, that also gets absorbed into the overall, I guess you could say, formula for Apollo Vega is Tejano, who is a current superstar in AAA and also features prominently in Lucha Underground. So there's that as well. So for those of you keeping score here, You got Gran Apollo, you've got Hernandez, you've got Batista, and you've got Tejano. You mash all four of those concepts of characters and movesets and appearances combined, and you get Apollo Vega. In layman's terms, in its base level concoction, so to speak. So, yeah, a lot going on with this character. Needless to say. Anyway, let's have a look at his entrance gear now. So you can clearly see here exactly where it is that the Tejano influence comes from, more specifically. You know, he's got the whole cowboy thing going on here. We got the Sid vest. Scroll over to the back. We've got another logo variation. This one here is also featured on his secondary attire as its primary element. And then the good old-fashioned JR cowboy hats. Comes together looking very, very well when he gets out to the ring as well. Really, really defines the character. And yeah, sometimes all you need is simple elements and put them together and you get a very, very cool look. And such is the case here with Mr. Vega. This is also going to be the entrance attire for his secondary gear as well, because it's just consistent, and there was no need for me to change anything up there. So yeah, now let's look at that alternate. So for the alternate attire, we just kind of flip things around just a tad here. The Super Mex logo is the front logo, front piece, primary element for the gear. And then we flip to the back and we've got the Made in Mexico logo along the back side of the tights. Pretty cool look. Really, really contemporary, which was kind of the vibe that I wanted to give to him when it is that I found these specific logos way back when. You'll see them again here on the knee pads, and yeah, I mean, that's just a really basic variation, but still using the same color scheme and the same concept, we can pull off a different look entirely that still has the same type of feel as the primary attire, and overall gives the character his flavor, if you will. So yeah, not too much else to say there. So we'll just give you a quick look at his entrance gear for this secondary attire. Pretty much the same as the primary attire's entrance gear. The only difference is that I used the primary attire's main logo as the logo to be used on the back side of the vest there, just to kind of give a wee bit of variation. You know, didn't want to use the exact same vest for both attires, so it was a pretty easy edit and a pretty easy choice to make, as opposed to using the Superman Super Mex logo there. That wouldn't have stretched out all the way down to the bottom of the attire. Well, it would have, but it wouldn't have looked good. So we went with this, and now you see even more the detail and the awesomeness of this logo as its own element on the back of the vest there. So yeah, that is Mr. Apollo Vega for 2018. I have kind of sort of thought about maybe making an alternate attire for him that actually uses a mask, kind of like a throwback to when it was that he was a masked wrestler. Maybe at some point in the near future I'll do an alternate. I've actually thought about doing some other alternate attires or alternate versions of creations of mine. Probably will do those after I've completely uploaded the entire XWA roster and finish off a couple of collaborations that I have planned. I kind of alluded to those in last week's video, but stuff like a masked version of Apollo Vega, the face painted version of AKI-SAN that I kind of spoke about when I was showcasing him, the non-Lotus, that being Miyoko Shinsuke, her actual I guess you could say mortal vessel, if you will, and maybe, just maybe, this is a really big maybe, a version of Happy Face, that being the original character Happy Face, before I decided I wanted to transform him into black. So we'll see. Yeah, I still got a lot of work to do before I even fathom starting on all of that stuff, but just something to kind of tease you guys with for the future. But for now, you got Apollo Vega, and he's pretty damn awesome. Really like the way he came out this year. And rounding out the Shoguns, we have here the 2018 version of Captain Canada, Drake Manning. Now, you can obviously notice from the physique that he probably looks a little more bulkier this year than he has in previous versions, even though he's always been a fairly large gentleman. I guess we could attribute that to the fact that now that Apollo Vega is a member of the Shoguns, he's convinced both Aki and Drake to spend a little bit more time in the gym, you know, get a little more, get a few more gains going on there. All kinds of gains. But yeah. Now, let's go on to the actual attire elements, which again are repeated elements that I've used pretty much every single year that I've created this character, because they're just so damn good. Why should I ever try to make anything different if I can just kind of flip things around and manipulate things to make them look different, even though they're not. So you got the kind of maple leaf Punisher skull combination going on here in the front, and then on the back you've got the Drake Manning name logo, which if you watched my previous videos might notice looks a whole lot similar to that of the logo work that I used for Les Canadiens, Esther Laurent and Jillian Pride, because it's the exact same thing. I just basically used that same font and that same style for their logo that I used originally for Drake's. And that goes the same for the texturing you see on the tights themselves, which is the same font style, not font style, the same Photoshop style that I used on a flat area in Photoshop and just made it into its own individual texture to use on attire, basically as decoration. And this is the end result. Another little side note for you, since there's obviously strong similarity between Les Canadiens and Drake Manning's look, I have not yet decided who is going to be Mr. Manning's romantic interest, but I do know it's going to be one of those two, just as like an added thing here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm actually I guess you could say pre-planning or brainstorming if they actually add something equivalent to the Mixed Max Challenge that they're going to be doing this month into 2K19. So if there is actually the possibility that we will have mixed tag matches back in WWE 2K19, I'm already preparing myself for that. That's going to be kind of a big deal there, in all truth. So, yeah, another little added side note blurb for you there. Anyway, let's scroll down here to the kick pads and knee pads. Once again, exactly the same elements. at least in terms of the actual knee pads and kick pads that you've seen on Les Canadiens, as in the Canadian flag stylized logo there, and the Canadian flag based Photoshop style texture on the kick pads themselves. Then we have the Canadian flag skull, which I actually did manage to find again and just made myself into its own elements. I forgot that I actually had the element itself for Drake Manning's attire, as opposed to by itself. So I could just remove the Captain Canada text and use that as an alternate for Les Canadiens at some point for a different variation of attire for them. Again, just me brainstorming here in real time as it is that I'm recording this. But yeah, this logo is actually the primary element to his secondary logo. So again, I'm using the same exact methods that I used for both AKI-SAN and Apollo Vega here, in just basically flipping the logos around from primary to secondary as the focus. And as a result, you get different looking attires that use the same elements as the other attire. So it's kind of uniform but different at the same time. And it also makes it easier for a lazy oaf like me to get this stuff done without having to do too much in terms of searching for different logos for different attires. Yeah, I know. So much effort I put into this stuff, isn't it? Anyway, let's look at his entrance gear now. So his entrance gear in classic Drake Manning fashion is a white leather jacket with a logo on the back. I thought about using the Captain Canada logo, the one with the skull, but I wanted to keep it in tune, so to speak, with the actual ring trunks he wears. So we went with the maple leaf skull instead. And yeah, you can see the result here with the emboss function. Looks pretty darn good. Now, I wanted to go with a Letterman jacket to kind of give red and white colors as opposed to just all white here, but I decided at the last second to go for leather jacket instead, because kind of sort of reminds me of Bret Hart, since he always wore leather jackets. Unfortunately, I can't put anything on the shoulders, but yeah, still looks damn good and fits the character. It's been his calling card, so to speak, for the most part, so I figured, why not? I figured, why change things up? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So yeah, pretty easy, simple. Maybe I might add some extra onto it, like actual Canadian flag on the sleeves, just to give it a little more decoration on the front half, but it's not so dire of a thing that needs to be done to where I couldn't just upload it as is and it not look good. So that's exactly what I did. Yeah. So here we have the alternate attire, and like I said before, the centerpiece is the actual Captain Canada logo variation, which is the Canadian flag skull. Got the wings on the side there, metallic wings. Kind of reminds me of the Shadowloo insignia in All Truth, as in the logo that M. Bison has on his hat. You know, it's a skull with wings protruding out of it, whereas instead of it being the Canadian maple leaf on the forehead of a skull, it's a lightning bolt. Always a very, very cool looking design. But yeah, this is a variation of that, or inspired from that, so to speak. So behind that, we've got that stylized Canadian flag logo that was taken from Community Creations, which automatically transformed these tights into a two-tone design. without me even trying. I love when the work gets done for me without even having to think about it. So it's basically white on the front half, and then you got red on this back half. And then again, the Drake Manning name logo there for added decoration just really completes the look and makes this entire look freaking flawless. Yeah. So before I get into the bottom half here, you'll note on the top half that he has one wrapped up red taped hand, that being his right hand. And this is significant to his actual finishing move, which has actually become a finishing move of his from 2K16 into 2K17, because the move just looks so damn good. It was just really, really cool looking when I saw it, and I was using it as a strong grapple move that I said, you know what? We need to make that one of his finishers as opposed to a submission move that I had when I initially made him. So the name of the finisher is the Red Hand of Ulster, and it's a discus clothesline. It's the variation of the discus clothesline from the standing grapple that ends in the opponent kind of folding over from the impact of the blow itself, kind of like they got hit and power bombed themselves onto the canvas. The name of the move stems from an old Irish tale, legend if you will. Manning, despite being obviously Canadian, has some Irish in his blood, so it's relevant to that. So the story is of two princes who had to race across a sea, a river, what have you, and the one who actually reached first would be crowned king. So one specific prince found himself on the losing end. He was going to lose, and so badly did he want to win and become king that he actually cut his hand off and threw it ahead of his brother to the land, and thus won, because technically he reached land first, as in his hand reached land first. The rules obviously didn't apply to it being a whole body reaching the land in order to win. So yeah, it's significant and pretty badass piece of mythology or legend, lore, whatever it is that you want to call it, that I decided I wanted to make that the name of his finishing maneuver, because it's a powerful gesture, what it is that that prince did, and I wanted that to be symbolized by his finishing maneuver being a powerful gesture, and that being a discus clothesline so hard that it's able to fold you up like an accordion. Definitely one of the stronger striking maneuvers that I have as a finisher assigned for one of my characters, and there are quite a few of those now that I'm coming to think of it. I have a lot of characters that use striking moves as finishing moves, and yeah, that's a nice little nuance that I've got going on over the course of these games, as it is that they've made these moves available. So yeah, there's that. Now let's get back into focus here on the bottom half, which is just once again a flip of logos, at least in terms of the kick pads. Whereas I had the maple leaf skull as the main element on the trunks in the primary, they're the element on the kick pads in the secondary. So once again, it's a flip of logos and some extra added variation to create a completely different look using the exact same elements. Easy stuff, and definitely not without a good amount of thought, but you can pull it off as long as it is that you plan ahead and come up with these ideas and just apply them, see what works, see what doesn't, and go from there. So, yeah. Let's take a look at his entrance gear for this attire now, which will in actuality be the basic walkout shirt with the same Drake Manning name logo going on there. Nothing on the back. Didn't really see a need to put anything extra on it. It's just basically his own branding, if you will. If you remember in last year's game, for the secondary attire, I had the Shoguns wearing actual Shogun logo gear. I decided I wanted to just give them their own specific branding and identities for this year's version of the game. I mean, obviously they're still together, they're still the Shoguns, but they just don't have any Shogun-based swag, at least yet. Maybe I'll give them a collective team shirt when it is that I tag them up together in maybe like, say, you know, 6-man tag matches, or this faction war idea that I still have rolling in my head. They would obviously be a part of that as a collective team, which would be an interesting element in itself, considering the fact that that would mean that AKI-SAN, who is in fact a disciple of the Togo Dojo, in fact the first disciple of the Togo Dojo, wouldn't actually be fighting with the Togo Dojo. So yeah, interesting added drama going on there, which further predicates me wanting to do this, but just not having enough time to do it with the current storylines I have planned on doing for the 2018 season. Really wish I had help. If I had 1 or 2 guys to help me with production, I could pull all this stuff off easily, but I have to prioritize. So that's something on the back burner there. Maybe an off-season thing as we go into 2K19. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, me going off on a tangent there a little bit. That completes Drake Manning for 2018. Bigger and badder than ever. And yeah. And now we switch gears to some bad guys, some pretty bad dudes. Probably the baddest of the bad in terms of the heels for the XWA roster. This, of course, are the members of the faction known as Villainy, aka Tyson Blackheart's Army of Darkness. And we are going to kick things off with the 2018 version of the God of War, Adrian Aries. Take a quick look real fast at his tattoo work, which again is just reworks of his tattoos that I already had set for him in 2K17. The wrap function definitely serves a great purpose here in terms of the arm sleeves, because I actually only used 2 variations of this arm tattoo design here, as opposed to 3 or 4 typically. There's one on the outside, which is the regular stretch method, and then on the inside of the arm is the wrap method to create the full sleeve effect. So, bit of a shortcut for you there. The chest tattoo is one that I had pulled brand new for 2K17, because I wasn't actually happy with the chest tattoo that I had for him in 2K16. So it's a bit of a rework there. Kind of a black heart in the center. You got some flames, some roses, some skulls. The black heart actually was something that I thought might actually have made sense to use on Tyson Blackheart, but he's got a far more fitting and convincing chest tattoo on him, as you've already seen if you took a look at his 2017 version. That pretty much doesn't change. And then on the top portion here, the collarbone, you have the text that says "Reap what you sow," which has been an element that I used on him ever since I actually first created the character back in the previous generation of games. And we'll flip it over to the back here, and you've got more skulls. Obviously, the theme for Mr. Aries here is skulls, just like the theme for AKI-SAN was dragons. And in the same vein, it's definitely fitting of this particular character because he's a bit on the dark and unhinged side. Obviously, you couldn't tell from outward appearances, but the conceptualization of the character Aries has always been a mixture, a mashup, if you will, of Triple H circa the Evolution days when he was at his most sadistic, if you will, and the legend killer rendition of Randy Orton's character, obviously involved in the same exact faction. So kind of a mixture between those. As we scroll down here to the tights, you can obviously see some more of the Triple H styled inspiration for his gear, on the fact that these are actually logos and artwork that has been used on Triple H's merchandise, shirts in specifically, but also tights as well. The text on the banner actually translates here Tremunt Malio to what it says on the front logo, which you obviously can't see because it's cropped off because I stretched it out, but I do actually have it on the knee pads, which says tremble before the hammer, which is fitting considering the fact that Aries' finisher is called the Hammer of Aries. So it all kind of plays itself into this whole God of War type of mythos that he has, that being Ares' God of War, not Kratos. So yeah, anyway, getting back up here to the tights, you can see once again that it's wrapped completely around the entire article in the same way that I had going for Apollo Vega. So basically the logo has completely defined his attire as opposed to just being an element of it. So once again, another example of the wrap function basically doing a lot of work for me here. So downward we have here again to the knee pads once more. Have a look at the logos there once again. And then on the boots, these are Batista boots, and I basically turned the gold strapping on it. I mean, turned the strapping on it that was normally leather and black to gold plating for a little added effect to complete the color calibration, if you will, for his gear. So with that said, we'll take a look at his entrance gear now. And so in keeping to the whole Triple H vibe, he's got a vest now that he walks out to the ring with. I previously had him wearing leather jackets, the same way that I have Kevin Lassiter and Drake Manning also in those, but this kind of fit here considering the fact that Triple H himself now, at least when he does make his appearances in the ring, uses this kind of leather biker jacket with the logo on the back. So it's kind of the same thing, sort of. Kind of ripping off Triple H's look in some elements and aspects. But then again, Triple H kind of ripped off Randy Orton's look because, you know, he hadn't been using the dark hand tape and such like that until he went into his part-time / semi-retirement gimmick or kick or whatever it is, and that's something that Orton had been doing for a while. But then again, Orton wore regular hand wraps while he was in Evolution, so it's just kind of like mixing things together here. It's really I guess connected. So, and it makes sense considering the fact that I've mashed up both of their personalities into Aries's, so it works out. So for the secondary attire, scroll into the tights, and it's pretty much a red and black variation using more Triple H inspired logo work. The difference here is obviously that this is a leather finish on the tights, as well as the knee pads with the Triple H logo with the sledgehammers on them as well. These are also elements that I've used on his previous attires in 2017 and 2016, which means that I probably might change things up here in 2K18, or maybe even when I make his 2019 version, just to you know, not be repeating using the same stuff. I do like to change things around every once in a while. It's just in some cases I'm extremely lazy in doing such when attires are not as complex as others, like for example AKI-SAN's. So yeah, pretty good look, self-explanatory, not much else it is that I need to explain here, so we'll just go ahead and show you the entrance attire for this one as well. Basically the cut off leather jacket again, this time with an actual leather finish, and we've got the biker cross logo embossed on the back there for the more realistic textured effect. And yeah, that pretty much completes it. He was never really one of he was never really a complex character for me to make, because I always had the idea for him and his persona predetermined right from when it was that I first made him, and that made it a pretty natural fit for me to have added him into a faction that was led by Tyson Blackheart, because they have similar mindsets and mentalities. The difference being that Blackheart obviously is a wee bit more methodical and controlled, whereas Aries here is, like I said, unhinged and borderline psychotic, very sadistic, which is going to play into some very, very interesting interactions and matchups against both the Riot Squad and members of Dusk going forward in 2K18. I'm really looking forward to getting that stuff done. Next up, we have a dude who was quite the crowd favorite in 2K17, the Enforcer, if you will, because what's a faction without an enforcer? This, of course, being the big dog, the real big dog, spelled D-A-W-G, better known as Rottwyler. So let's scroll into the shorts. The placement of the logos this year that I have made or manipulated in Photoshop is identical to his ring gear from 2K17, with the exception of that they are obviously slightly bigger in terms of the smaller logos, as in I have them kind of wrapped around 3/4 of the left side of his shorts, front and back, and then you have the red Cerberus there on the right side of the shorts, all of which has his name logo emblazoned on it. Obviously Cerberus is significant to this particular character on the fact that he is a big dog, just like Rottwyler is a big dog, and Cerberus obviously also was the protector of the gates of the underworld in Roman mythology, and Rottwyler here is technically the protector of Tyson Blackheart, so to speak. He kind of sort of serves double duty as being villainy enforcer, as well as Blackheart's own, I guess, bodyguard slash attack dog, something like that. You could consider Tyson Blackheart being an evil version of the $1 Million Man, and Rottwyler here being an evil and far more effective version of Virgil. Like, he actually gets shit done, as opposed to just taking bumps for Blackheart, who obviously, as you will see when I show him next, doesn't necessarily need a bodyguard. But the fact that he has one just makes him that much more badass, and kind of says a lot about Rottwyler himself, if he's the guy who is the guy that you have to get through to get to Tyson Blackheart. That's a pretty telling tale there, if you ask me. So yeah, we'll scroll into the tattoos here. Once again, pretty much same elements in the same placement that I've had for him for the past couple of versions of the game. The physique actually is probably a little more, I guess, toned than it was last year, because obviously you could only have certain builds with the body morphing, if you could even call it morphing function, that they had last year. So I made him intentionally bulky, but not necessarily as muscular as most of the other big men that I have made and will make, obviously, because there's a few more big dudes that I have down the pipeline. A couple of brothers, so to speak, one Greek, one Roman, as you know, giving a wee bit of a spoiler there. But anyway, in game he still has his size. Obviously you don't really get a full grasp of it just looking at him by himself here in this menu, but when you have him in game in comparison to other characters, he's got some weight to him, and that pretty much makes sense considering the style of wrestling that I have him using, which, if you probably couldn't already tell, is more attuned to MMA and vale-tudo and what is called pancration or pancras, which is a strong style of wrestling that leans more towards actual martial arts than it does performance, as it is that mixed martial arts guys call professional wrestling. They call it performance wrestling, as opposed to amateur style wrestling, which is more professional or realistic. It's all convoluted and confusing, but basically Rottweiler's always been formulated to be more of a I guess you could say Brock Lesnar type of wrestler, but not necessarily Brock Lesnar. Obviously you can see the design cues in the shorts, but from his appearance as well as his fighting style, he leans more actually in terms of the style towards Craig Marduk from the Tekken series, and by extension the actual figure in mixed martial arts that Craig Marduk was kind of sort of loosely based off of, not officially, but you can definitely see similarities in their size and their mannerisms. That being, of course, mixed martial arts legend, even though he unfortunately never actually fought in the UFC. A bit too big and a bit too unhinged for the UFC, unfortunately. But he was definitely a big deal in pride over in Japan. I, of course, am speaking of Bob Sapp, the gargantuan Bob Sapp, who actually also has made several appearances in action with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Very familiar figure over in Japan. And yeah, just another example of mashing up many different things together. Now, as far as his actual appearance goes, even though it was never a facial appearance similarity that I wanted to have, you can obviously see, however, that many of his design cues as far as the beard and Obviously, the overall skin tone that I chose to have for the face texture that I did use was inspired by the late mixed martial arts fighter Kevin Ferguson, better known to the world as Kimbo Slice. Rest in peace, Kimbo. But yeah, pretty much putting all that together is what made Rottwyler happen. And yeah, it's just another example of me doing what it is that I usually do, which is just take one thing, throw it in with another thing, mix it with another thing, put it all together, and bam, you got yourself a character. Speaking of which, I've actually taken into consideration I'm going to actually be doing this at some point. I don't know if I mentioned this in previous videos, but I have gotten requests from some people to do tutorial videos or a tutorial video about character and how to build one, and I'm looking forward to that. That's definitely something I'm going to be doing in the not so distant future, but it requires meticulous detail for me to actually explain in a clear and concise manner. So I have to kind of take my time with how it is that I approach that. But it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to explaining to you guys in more detail than I do in these videos, because you're getting kind of a shortened, truncated version of that whole design process for time constraints, even though these videos do wind up ending being more than an hour long and people still watch it all the way through, which is kind of a feat in and of itself. But yeah, kind of going on a tangent there. Anyway, now let's take a look at the entrance attire for the big dog here. So the one element that does change from last year to this year is his walkout shirt, which you can clearly see and clearly agree looks freaking badass. I mean, it's a rabid dog barking at you, about to probably bite your face off, and that's pretty much the design. It was so good of a design that I didn't even want to put any text over it. Like, it just speaks for itself right there. Normally I would have put something like beware of dog or big dog or his name as a logo accompaniment to it, but this stands alone by itself extremely well, to the point where I really didn't have to do much else except maybe throw a little extra on the back there for a little I guess you could say brand identification, so to speak. But yeah, really cool looking logo there for the walkout shirt. So cool that I actually used it as the main element for his secondary attire that you'll see in a couple of minutes. Scrolling up here to the hat, because, you know, he has to walk out with a skull cap. That's what MMA fighters do nowadays. Gotta be rocking that swag, even though it's all sponsored Reebok crap now in the UFC at least. No expressionism anymore. Remember when guys used to come out in all different types of brands of gear, like Tap Out, obviously, which WWE, by the way, has their exclusive licensing deal with, of course. Hence he has Tap Out gloves here, product placement. But yeah, you know, they came out in Tap Out. They had Affliction, which was one of my favorite brands. They still do shirts and stuff like that too, but you know, it's kind of not had as much popularity since it's not associated with mixed martial arts anymore, thanks to the UFC signing this exclusivity branding deal with Reebok. But yeah, another tangent for you there. Anyway, the Rottwyler logo on the side there, because you have to wear the logos on the side. Gotta be to the side, can't wear it to the front, that's just lame, you know. And yeah, not much else to say here. So let's go ahead and look at that secondary attire. So for the secondary attire, we went ahead and gave him the singlet. And once again, you see the dog logo, the rabid dog logo here as the main element, wrapped completely around. Kind of has that Ryback slash Rob Van Dam type of airbrushed feel to it. But then we also put the one of the Rottwyler logos on the back there just to kind of give it a little more brand identification, and gave it the two-tone there because there's actually black and white tones on opposite ends of the actual logo itself, and it didn't look right to me on a solid, so I went with two-tone, and that actually makes the back look a little bit more convincing there, as opposed to just being one color and then kind of cropped off because of the edges of the logo itself. So yeah, probably explaining a little bit too much there, but I just have to be thorough. I mean, the damn gear looks good. That's all it is that you probably really care about. So that's pretty much it. I mean, nothing else going on as far as the knee pads and the boots, the boxing shoes, wrestling shoes, whatever it is that you want to call it, because there's nothing really complicated about his gear. It's straightforward gear, and there's no real need for me to be too elaborate as far as that goes. I just wanted to give him the singlet look here because that kind of reminds me of Ryback, basically, and other guys like Tyrus slash Brodus Clay, who kind of also plays a little bit into his style, considering the fact that he likes to use suplexes and things of that nature. So yeah. Anyway, now on to the walkout entrance attire for this gear. So this walkout gear is obviously a little bit more reminiscent to his entrance attire from last year's primary attire. Once again, we've got the Cerberus here. This is artwork here that I actually found from a Google search. That's actually pretty cool because it's Cerberus actually in front of the gates to the underworld. So this is the big dog in his natural element, and you know, it's kind of symbolic considering the fact that behind the doorway, the gateway if you will, it looks like it's actual fire. And what would you attribute the underworld and fire to? Demons, more specifically devils, more specifically a red devil. So it's pretty symbolic there as far as Rottweiler's role in this whole universe, if you will. And to the back there, nothing going on, no extra logo, because that wasn't really needed for this one, considering it's more of an artistic piece. Scroll up to the hat, we've got the alternates Rottweiler logo on the front. This time I actually did put it on the actual front because circular logos kind of come off looking funny when it is that you move them to the side. I experimented with it and it didn't look right to me, and I didn't want to do the stretch out wrap function on the entire hat, so we had to improvise there. So yeah, that in a nutshell is Rottweiler for 2018, and yeah, he's a heavy hitter, man. He definitely is fitting of his moniker, and like I said, the fact that this guy's an enforcer and a bodyguard to somebody who clearly does not need an enforcer or a bodyguard says a lot about both of them. And yeah, you're gonna see the reason for that right now. And to close things out, we've got ourselves the 2018 version of the bad guy. The bad guy, as in my top heel for XWA. This, of course, being the Red Devil himself, Tyson Blackheart. And you can clearly see where he gets that nickname from when you scroll up here to the chest tattoo. Like I said, very, very fitting of his persona, and by extension, those it is that he associates himself with. Tyson, of course, being the long-lost twin brother of current XWA president and CEO Carmella Blackheart. That, of course, was made in a stark revelation / character repackaging that I made for him back in the previous generation of games, that has carried over into the WWE 2K games in the form of a blood feud, if you will, for control not just of the XWA, but for the whole enchilada, if you will, the parent corporation known as the Blackheart Foundation that Carmella actually inherited from their father. Unknowingly, the fact that obviously he had a son that was separated. I can't really give you the full details right here. I mean, I've had backstory of this in previous episodes of my XWA shows. If anything, I'll try to find all those details and put them together and make like a retrospective history video for those of you who might be new to all of this, so you can catch on quickly to exactly who this guy is and the magnitude of where he stands and what he has planned on doing, which is a very hostile takeover. So, we got some emphasis here, symbolic emphasis for his tattoo work, on the fact that he's got a demon tattooed onto his chest, but he has tribal style Christian crosses tattooed onto his arms, and then a whole bunch of demonic / angelic stuff going on the back there. If you can notice from the detail, right there in that centerpiece, you have kind of an angelic figure. It's got a halo around him, and then you got the wings obviously towards the top, and then over that you've got an actual red devil kind of torn out, and underneath you have kind of impish looking demonic creatures as well. Like I said, this is all symbolic to the fact that Tyson Blackheart himself considers himself to be a being or an entity that stands outside of the conventions of good and evil. Between those two, you have him, at least in his own mind, and he stands for something higher than that. That being, I guess, power and complete. I'm trying to find the proper word for it, but basically, he likens himself to exist outside of the conventional norms of what people consider to be good and evil, or even decent, which plays into his whole villain persona, considering the fact that I've got some pretty bad dudes on the XWA roster, and for him to be above those means he would have to be something more than just a bad dude. He has to be beyond evil, and the tattoos are kind of symbolizing that aspect of the character. Now, granted, that fact, he's still a pretty dark character of himself, so keep that in mind. As we scroll down here, this skull logo was pulled from Community Creations. The reason I decided I wanted to go with this type of look for him is primarily laziness, as it is per usual, but then also the fact that this logo is actually pretty common, and I felt I didn't really need to go and do a Google search for it, because I've seen this skull in particular, this design, uploaded so many times that it just really didn't need to happen. But for posterity, I have actually downloaded the logo. I saved it onto my own hard drive just in case, and I might actually do some manipulation here, maybe do a color swap, make it look red for future updates to his attire to actually make it look more like a demonic skull as opposed to just looking like a very, very evil one. I also wanted to actually kind of differ from the typical red and black color scheme that I make for him, which is ironic considering the fact that his nickname is the Red Devil, but he's not actually wearing any red in his primary attire. It's just one of those things. I mean, I wanted to do something different for him, at least. So, we got that. Scroll into the boots, pretty much. Same design, same concept wrapped around. And, yeah, I mean, another cut and dry port over. The main differences here going on is obviously his physique compared to 2K16's version of him. I intentionally make Tyson to be very, very muscular. He's on the lines of Eric Ulrich level of muscularity, and that just adds to the whole ominousness of the character. The fact that he's, you know, a big, strong, and equally dangerous in terms of his cunning and strategy individual. So he's kind of got it all working for him. He can actually physically beat you, or he can outsmart or outwit or just plain intimidate you. So once again, it's just all elements putting together to create what I consider to be the ideal villain for my universe and the stories that I'm trying to tell through it. Also, another considerable change is his hair. This has always been kind of a point of contention for me, because some years I have him with long hair, some years I have him with shorter hair. In 2K17, I actually had him with the buzz cut, the Caesar, like Curtis Axel has. This year I decided to go with more of a slick back look, and it actually does fit him. And I mean, all the hairstyles that I've used have fit, but I've never really finalized on one for him because, you know, that's just that whole passage of time thing that I always talk about, or have talked about in previous videos, where you change some subtle things from year to year to indicate the fact that it's been a passage of time from that previous version to the next version, and also for the sake of it not just being a complete and total copy and paste job when it is that you're making these characters over from game to game. Even though I probably might stick with this hair for a period of time. I think I used this on Jung Suzuki last year because I didn't want him to have the Okada hair. But I have Suzuki now with long hair, so I'm going to go with this here for Tyson and just stick with it like that for now. Yeah. Anyway, let's look at the entrance gear. So it seemed almost convenient for me to give Tyson Blackheart Aleister Black's vest for his entrance attire. First and foremost, it actually looks pretty damn good in game, especially with his entrance that you will see and agree it when it is that you download is pretty freaking badass, because it's a variation of Aleister Black's entrance, which would obviously imply right off the bat here that you're going to need that new NXT pack in order to get Tyson here, because he's using Aleister Black's content to some extent. But on top of that, it's just the fact that obviously Mr. Black's at least outward persona and appearance fits into the character of Tyson Blackheart. So yeah, it kind of wrote itself out here. So basically, you got the Leviathan cross there. You can Google that to find out what that means. You got the other designs, skulls, bones, and yeah, more cryptic stuff going on in the back, which, like I said, perfectly fits into the pathos and the mythos of Tyson Blackheart and his character. So all I really needed to do was adjust the color of the actual designs on the vest to match to the color of the skull logo as close as possible. It's not 100%, but from a distance you really can't notice that anyway. And you're definitely not going to notice it when he's walking out because he's using red lighting, so you're not going to notice it at all anyway. But yeah, it was a pretty easy choice to make for me as far as how it was that I was going to have him coming out to the ring. So, that being said, let's look at his alternate. So, for the alternate attire, this comes in great thanks to the fact that the top element of the skull design that I pulled from Community Creations actually has transparencies on it. It was pretty much made more for being a tattoo design, but since I already have his tattoos covered, obviously, this becomes more of a logo design, and this in turn creates that exact effect that I was talking about before, where the skull actually takes on more of a reddish tone to it, thanks in part to the fact that I just simply changed the color of his tights to red as opposed to it being black. So you see that detail now, and it also incidentally creates kind of a two-tone color effect on his alternate attire, which is pretty damn cool, and in all truth would probably have been more logical to use for his primary attire, considering the fact, like I said, that his nickname is the Red Devil. But whatever, it was something that just happened incidentally when I was trying to figure out how it was that I was going to make his secondary attire, because I had originally considered using his actual chest tattoo design as the logo design to use on his entrance gear. But the first thing, I mean, not his entrance gear, but his ring gear here for the alternate. So the first thing that I actually did was change the color of the tights to red, and then I was just basically going to swap this logo from the edit menu to his chest logo, but then I went and changed the color and saw the effect that it created and said, no, that's not necessary. I kind of like what we got going on here. So there you have it. Once again, the work was extremely easy in creating this look and this attire. And yeah, I mean, the most challenging part of recreating any of these guys really is the physique, because obviously you have options now as to how it is that you can define how it is that their physiques are going to look. And in Tyson's case, I went bigger, and it worked out. So yeah, now let's look at the entrance gear for the red gear attire. Pretty much same vest, just with a color swap. Instead of it being the dark bone gray, we go with the deep crimson red. I actually played around with making it a red vest and the designs being black, but that was a little on the loud side for me. So we decided to go with black anyway, considering he's a black-hearted individual. So this is one of those instances where the typical color palette that I use of red and black actually makes sense for the character, aside from it being a frequent personal preference of mine out of context. So yeah, pretty damn cool if you ask me. And once again, not much else needs to be said or explained here. That's it for Tyson Blackheart. And yeah, like I said before, this is my main bad guy for the XWA, and you can pretty much see here visibly why that is. You'll also see it physically when it is that you download him into your game and see all of the aggressiveness he is capable of doing. And now on to our download details for this week's content, to which, by the way, they actually added a nifty little new feature in the latest patch/hotfix for the community creations menus themselves, in which on the bottom left hand corner of a thumbnail for any given core you will actually see one of two icons, that being either the VC credit icon or a little shopping bag icon that will give you an instant indication as to whether or not that core requires either VC purchasables or unlockables from the game itself, or any of the DLC content that's already been released. So you'll see that instantly whenever it is that you are downloading CAWS from the community creation servers now, without actually having to go into the details menu. But since you obviously don't see that in this actual upload menu of mine, I will give you those details as it is that I have been in previous weeks. So, going in, AKI-SAN will require both DLC and VC purchasable content. Drake Manning will require none of the above, so anybody can get him, whether it is that you have the DLC or not. You probably should have the DLC by now. Apollo Vega does require both the DLC and purchasables from the unlockable stuff in-game. Adrian Aries will not require either of such content, using all default movesets and entrance elements. Rottwyler will require DLC, particularly that of the new school NXT pack content. And Tyson Blackheart will require both relevant DLC as well as unlocked stuff from in-game via the VC credit purchasables. So, you will notice a couple of things here in finally closing out with more updates. 3 out of the 5 members of Katana have been replaced. I've kept Tane Tua and Duke Morrow up, both because they both exceeded 100 downloads, which is a pretty big milestone for me, considering the fact that I do only original CAWS. So 100 is kind of a big deal, considering the fact that a lot of originals don't get that much as far as uploads or downloads are concerned, unless they're favorites. So thanks for that. But they will be replaced in time, as will Isis Diamante, Xander Xavier Luther, and Christian Phoenix. This is basically the 100 club right now, along with Sonia Robbins at 797. Let's get that to 800 likes, guys. Smash that like button. But yeah, I will eventually steer back into the original course that I had of uploading the remaining members of the XWA Diamond Division that I have not yet. I think there's maybe about 15 or 16 more of those that I still haven't even put up, that have been completed for about a month and a half now. But the good news here, if you pay attention to the top right hand corner of your viewing window, is that I'm now only 421 downloads away as of this video from Diamond rank, which of course will unlock the last 5 available core slots with which I can upload more content for you guys. So with that, I would then be able to complete the uploading of the remainder of the Diamond Division, and then as well as re-upload again any older CAWS that you might have missed from previous upload packs, if you will, because perhaps you just missed out on it, or you didn't have the proper DLC in order to get it the first or second, or in some cases third times. So yeah, hashtag get 3x to diamond. Make sure you download this stuff. Get it. Just get it. Even if you don't use it, just get it, so I can get the diamond rank and have those 5 slots. Finally. This would actually be the fastest I'd pull that off, I think. I forgot how fast I got to diamond rank last year. It was pretty fast, but yeah, we're on pace with that. Or, if anything, we're going faster because I've pretty much been churning these creations out like clockwork over the past month or so. So, yeah, we're just going to keep that going. Anyway, as always, search tags for all of my content is going to be 3x CAW/XWA. And by the way, creations are not also the only stuff that I have uploaded to the servers. If I can give you a little bit of a spoiler here, there will be a future weekly upload update special that will be showing this stuff in depth for you. But I just wanted to make you aware that this stuff is actually there for updates or uploads for you. That being a special arena that I call the Proving Ground. You can obviously see what the emphasis on that one is. And then I have 2 versions uploaded of the View Japan Pro Wrestling Arena. There is the smaller version, which will be loosely based on the Budokan Hall in Tokyo, Japan. And then I have the larger arena version that is obviously based around the legendary Tokyo Dome. So those 3 arenas are available in addition to the original 5 that I already had. I'll actually be showcasing all of these in their own specific video at some point in the very, very near future. So there is that. There are also these. I'm not going to give you any close-ups of these because I'm also going to be putting those in a specific video. But yes, all of the XWA Championship belts are available for upload, and might I say, they look better now than they did even when it is that I made them last year, because of the effects that we have available to us in this year's version of the game. And I'm probably going to say that a whole lot when it is that I do this video, so apologies in advance if I sound redundant, but wow, the things I were able to do with these belts once you see them in close, which you will see them in close if it is that you download them, but you can, you know, watch the video anyway, just for your own entertainment, and also to get that insight into my creative process for making this stuff actually happen, which I'm supposing is the reason why most of you watch these videos all the way to the end anyway. So yeah, make sure you are subscribed to my channel in order to get access to said content, and make sure that you are getting notifications by hitting that bell button next to subscribe. That way you know whenever that content is actually going to be made live and available for your viewing pleasure. That being said, thanks for watching. Once again, make sure you like this video if you found it interesting, informative, and or entertaining. And yeah, that's gonna do it. Until the next time, folks, this is OB, aka 3X, signing off. See ya!